Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows but Zuckus.
I think you mean Forlom.
Philistine! Everyone knows this is actually Zuckus. This isn't the world according to Kenner. This is real life.
And in real life, the card back said Forlom. Kenner's mix-up was our reality.
You know a few people over the years have wondered why you haven't done a Star Wars Follies about this topic. It would be really interesting.
No, it wouldn't.
Why not?
Because I literally just explained it. A Follies video would be like... Hey everybody! In 1981, Kenner confused the names of two of the bounty hunters because both of them had bug eyes. They called Forlom Zuckus and Zuckus Forlom. Whoops! And that would be Star Wars Follies 15.
So does that make the one you're about to do Star Wars Follies 16?
What? No!
Zuckus, you will have your justice, my friend.
We gotta get back to the past, to the 20th century. Digging through the bubble wrap into your memories. Back was the collector, he's protecting what we find. Relentless heavy metal guns will keep us safe through time. RetroBlasting.
This is killer! Oh, no, 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 no!
The stuff you love since you were 9. We're blasting into the past to see what thrill still lasts.
In the early 1990s, as vintage Star Wars figure collecting started to heat up, you always heard about four figures being the unicorns of the figure line: rocket-firing Boba Fett, Blue Snaggletooth, Yak Face, and Takara's Windup R2-D2. Takara only sold this figure in Japan until Kenner licensed it for sale briefly in Canada. Despite this, the vintage community quickly adopted the Windup R2 into the figure lineup because it was generally to scale with the original Kenner figure. Motorization wasn't exclusive to the Takara R2-D2 in the vintage days. You had the Sonic Land Speeder and the radio-controlled Sandcrawler as well, but the Takara R2-D2 has really stolen the limelight. In fact, 3 vintage Star Wars Windup toys sold in the US have been all but forgotten. Let me introduce you to the esoteric world of Structors Action Walkers by MPC. It was 1984, and Kenner was still cruising on a new wave of Return of the Jedi action figure toys. And it wasn't the only licensee looking to find a second year of profit from a trilogy that from every vantage point looked done and done. Since the beginning of Star Wars merchandising, MPC had been making model kits of the spaceships, and with each new film, they added to the fleet of Star Wars model kits available. I'll never forget walking into the local K&K Toys at Hickory Hollow Mall in Nashville and seeing an entire aisle full of these things all marked down for clearance prices. There were 3 choices of Structors Action Walkers: the AT-AT, the AT-ST, and C-3PO. I'd never seen them before. They had hundreds of them, and they were already on closeout. Not a great sign. But this 6-year-old kid was seduced by the AT-AT Walker offering. See, I didn't have the big AT-AT, so this might be my only chance. Similar to how I didn't have the large Kenner TIE Fighter, only the micro collection version. Another father was with his son who was exchanging his Structors purchases because the box that was supposed to contain the AT-ST had C-3PO parts in them instead. I recall thinking maybe we were making a mistake. Officially, these were still classified as model kits. However, they were snap-fit design and largely molded in the correct colors. Where they blurred the lines between model kit and toy was in the wind-up mechanism, central to each one's function. No glue needed, no paint required, and in a few minutes you had a motorized Star Wars toy. Granted, the scale of these toys was on the small side. Unless you pretended that they were Imperial drones or something, they weren't going to work with your standard Kenner figures. However, the two walkers integrated extremely well with the Micro Collection. The AT-ST wasn't far off from the size of the Scout Walker in the Micro Collection, and while the AT-AT was rather undersized, scale issues abounded in the Micro Collection anyway. Given that the Micro Collection never produced an AT-AT, the Structors version was a welcome addition. C-3PO, on the other hand, was much larger than both the Micro series and the standard Kenner series, so working him into play scenarios with your other Star Wars toys required more imagination.
Jimmy! Jimmy, I know you loved Miko as much as I did. I forgive you. Oh God, we can't both die here, Jimmy. Do you want Miko to be alone for the rest of her life? Go!
Star Wars Droids, every Saturday at 8 a.m. on ABC. The only way these had a chance of operating properly was on a hard, flat surface. Walking would be next to impossible on carpet. The wind-up mechanism worked pretty well for the Scout Walker. The AT-AT, from what I recall, had a decent walking motion also, but alas, my surviving childhood examples mechanism is wound out at this point, which is a common problem with vintage wind-up toys. Both walkers had built-in motion to allow the chin guns to move in and out as the toy walked under its own power. The design was admittedly pretty nifty. C-3PO's design was intended to allow his head to bobble side to side as he hobbled along, but his foot skis that prevent him from falling over tend to warp and catch on each other, halting the motion of the wind-up action with each step. And the foot skis are not interchangeable with the 2 feet. 3PO is prone to falling apart at the best of times, and his foot skis are usually the first items to go missing. For the walkers, the turnkey handles for the wind-up action like to get lost, so watch out for that. The two walkers were eventually re-released by AMT Ertl in 1997 in their Snapfast lineup. Check the copyright stamps carefully on the wind-up mechanisms to ensure you have the MPC originals. They are otherwise identical toys from the same molds. I'm not blind to how niche these toys are, even for a vintage Star Wars enthusiast. But their dynamic original box art and the innovation that MPC put into these makes them some of my favorite vintage Star Wars toys outside of the legendary Kenner line.